Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited for today's session. I'm joined by the phenomenal Tracey Baxter, and we are going to be looking at how to revise like a pro. So, the aim of today's session is for you guys to discover practical evidence informed revision techniques that genuinely help students learn more effectively. So, in the session, we're going to be breaking down what makes revision stick, how to avoid common pitfalls, and the simple habits that lead to stronger, longer term memory and exam confidence. So, you should be expecting clear explanations, actionable strategies, and ideas that you can put into play practice straight away. So, my name is Nicola Allen, and I am very proud to be the managing director of Educake. And I am overwhelmed and thrilled to be joined by the amazing Tracey Baxter, who I will now pass across to tell you a little bit about herself and to jump straight into the webinar. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Nick. Pleasure to be here, as always. I'm Tracey Baxter. I'm a trust science lead. I'm the assistant science lead for Star Academies, so a large academy trust, and the science lead as a consultant for Southport Learning Trust. So I'm based up north. That's a smaller trust up north. And I'm also an independent consultant part-time and work with people like the awarding organisations and do quite a lot of work with Educake and with Nick. So always nice to be working with Educake. Okay, so Nick's sort of given us the outline, but just reinforce again what we're going to look at. We're going to think about what the research tells us. So you might have seen the research, you might not, but it's just a little reminder of what the research tells us about the effectiveness of revision strategies. Reflect really on that, how that looks for your students. Are they using the most impactful strategies or not? Think about what you can do to improve how effective revision is. I've got a focus really on some short-term things that you can take away because obviously we're all really gunning for our, trying to get our year 11s up to speed at the minute and trying to get them as best prepared as they can. So we've got some of that sticking plaster stuff still going on, but also thinking about longer term strategy. So what can we be doing from Key Stage 3, for example? Once I've gone through the session, I am going to ask Nick just to demonstrate something as well. And then at the end, we should have time if anybody's got any other questions. And Nick or I are happy to answer any questions. So just to give a little overview of what we mean by revision. So revision, generally what pops into people's heads, it's that independent, it's that out of lessons, it's that stuff that students do at home. But we know, I think more and more since I've started teaching, so I started teaching in 1999, there's definitely more of an expectation that we just have to plan more of that stuff into the curriculum because we do have students that, for whatever reason, don't do work independently out of school. But aside from that, apart from the fact that we need to get some revision planned in and use some of these effective strategies to support that longer term learning, we also um, need to help students within the curriculum, either to prepare the resources or to practice the strategies of what makes revision effective. So we've got both of those two things going on. We've definitely got what we're doing in the curriculum will influence what is happening out of lessons, whether that's in intervention sessions, in the holidays, after school, at home. Um, but they're both focused on supporting long-term learning, and we need to have the two working together to get the most impact from that. So we're hoping that within school we can provide the structure and we can provide the skills that students can then work independently and effectively. This slide, I'm just going to jump past that, but it just gives you some of the research that we've used for today's session. So John Dunlosky's done a lot of work. EEF, always a great place to go, isn't it, for that meta-analysis of huge amounts of research. So there's loads of stuff on this that agrees. So just to give a little definition as well of what I'm talking about, learning I'm meaning as a change in the long-term memory. And when I'm working with my students, I'm always talking to them about, okay, you need to think about when you get into that exam, what are you going to do when the page is blank? What are you going to do when you've got just those blank lines? It's about what you can recall and what you can put into practice from that. So gradually moving them over to that less dependent on the notes, on the resources, and so on. So that's what we're talking about, long-term learning, long-term memory. Um, some of the research, these are not in any order, they're just in a random order. These are the strategies, the tools or the approaches that we can take that we commonly take around revision. So I think most of them are self-explanatory, but let me just check. So highlighting and underlining. I love a highlighter. My students love a highlighter. One of the best things I've done with my year 11s that I'm working with now is giving them highlighters and coloured post-it notes, and they're all over that. So, you know, might not be the most impactful, but it's a start. Practice testing, we know we need to do lots of practice testing, get them used to the exam question style and so on. Summarizing, so just creating some condensed notes from what they've looked at, that explaining how or why, so not just stopping at that recall, but asking that, well, how or why, get into those explanations, which we know explain comes up so much in GCSEs. We've got mnemonics, which some students really love those. Spaced retrieval, so that retrieval practice, which most of us have got going on in our classrooms now. So, we'll start with 3 questions based on retrieval. It might be last lesson, it could be last week, it could be a previous topic. We might have, I know some schools use sort of a retrieval quadrant or a recall quadrant, but we've generally got lessons that start with that retrieval. So we're factoring that in within the curriculum in every lesson, more or less. Interleave practice, that just means where you would cover more than one skill or more than one topic in any one learning session. So developing those skills to be able to link ideas and link processes and so on. That's quite high level. Imagery, anything that just helps it to stick, and just rereading. So I'm just going to sit and reread my notes. I'm not going to write anything. I'm just going to read over my notes again. So just a personal reflection for you. Which do you think of those are the most impactful? And in a second, I will put a slide up to show you what the research says are the most impactful strategies. And then we can think about taking some of those impactful strategies. How can you put those into action? What kind of systems and processes can you get your students working with to put these most impactful ones into practice? So this is what the research says. Retrieval. So there's no, it's no surprise really that we've had a massive focus on that in our classrooms. Having that, we start with a do now activity that's focused on retrieval, or we have a retrieval activity at the start of the lesson. Practice testing, the more students can practice and get used to the way that the questions are asked and get used to what's asked, because there are only so many ways you can ask things, we know that that really helps them. Then you've got these medium ones of explaining that how or why, so taking it to that next step. That interleave practice, which I said is all about linking, so linking ideas together, linking processes, and explaining how and why they're linked. Those 2 things sort of go together. Summarizing, so summarizing notes means the act of taking what you've got in your whole notes or your revision guide, whatever it is, condensing that and writing it down is really important. It's the writing it down as well. You're not just reading it. And then we've got these lower impact strategies like imagery, just rereading, highlighting and underlining, and using mnemonics. So things to just reflect on in terms of that research. Your first reflection, your personal reflection, is just which do you think your students favour? I know which ones my students favour and my children. They like to reread. They don't like to write. They do like things like mnemonics. They do like highlighting. Would they necessarily go for those high and medium strategies without being, really taught and supported to be able to do that? Not many would. Um, the other thing to think about, if we know that these lower impact strategies, that's what they are, the lower impact, should we just abandon those? No, I don't think we should. Mnemonics actually, this is a bit of where the research sort of doesn't give the full picture on this one. Mnemonics, we know that research shows that actually in terms of remembering, mnemonics can help by, it can improve remembering things by about up to 77%. So that is really effective. They just don't apply everywhere, do they? So I think that's part of why that's in a low effective strategy. Actually, students can really benefit from them. You'll have mnemonics in your head now. Richard of York gave battle in vain, whatever it is. The reason we can still remember those from when we're little is because they're really memorable. It's just an easy way of remembering them. And therefore, they might be lower impact, but they don't apply everywhere. But where they do, we know that they do support learning. Would I try and discourage my students from highlighting and underlining? No, I've just said I give them highlighters and I give them post-it notes just to make things look colourful. If that's the way in, then that's absolutely fine. And that's what we want to do. We want to get students engaging any way that they can. So if they want to start with rereading, that's okay. It's just getting them a way into it, and it's better than nothing. What we need to try and do, the trick is in shifting that balance. So yes, they've still got some of those strategies that they find easy to do, and it's a nice way in. I know when I'm starting any kind of new project, I love getting my file dividers ready and my highlighters, and I just feel like I've made a start. So that's okay. It's about shifting that balance and supporting students to just tip it a bit more so that they are doing some more of space retrieval, practice testing, and so on, and they're not just focusing on what we know are those lower impact strategies. So what we're going to do now, I'm just going to give you some ideas, some strategies that can incorporate some of these approaches. So particularly the high impact ones, but also we have got things in there that also will cover mnemonics and will cover highlighting and underlining. We've got some really clear strategies that it's really obvious to see they take into account more than one of those different strategies that the research says work. Um, a general thing, I say this all the time with my students, they will go, look, all right, look, all right. So look, cover, write, or say, and then check. It applies everywhere. You can use it for anything. So no matter how they're revising, it's a really good check that you can do. So this is like a universal approach that you can feed into any of your revision strategies, just as a way of getting them to do that final check and not just sticking with, well, I've reread it and I'll just assume it's in my long-term memory. So again, I've put that thing up. This is what we're trying to get them to. We're trying to get them to a point of when you've got that blank page, what is it that you can remember? What you're going to be able to do? So this next approach, I'm giving you this example. This comes from I see more and more schools doing this now, where they've got a whole school approach and they've picked out some certain strategies that they're trying to really push across the whole school in all subjects and for secondary throughout key stage 3 and 4. So this is one example. So this is the big four. This is actually a local school to me. This is the approach that they use. It doesn't really matter which approaches you use. It does matter that they're based on evidence, and there's lots of evidence. You've just seen all those strategies that evidence say do help students with revision. What's really important is you've got some of that consistency across your whole school if possible. If you can't do that, at least across your whole department. So if you can't influence that whole school, the best that you can do as a science team or any team, whatever subject you are, sorry, assuming you're all science, but whatever department you're, if you can at least be in your bubble all doing the same thing, it will really help. So consistency in approaches so that children can really get to grips with how do I take on this approach, but also giving them some of that variety. So not everybody likes mnemonics, not everybody likes flashcards, not everybody likes concept maps or condensed notes, but actually having that variety of approach just to keep them so they don't get stale, or they can choose the approaches that really work with them, but just giving them the opportunity to play around with those and see what works with what works best for them and what helps them the best. So the example from a school might be that we've got these big four. We're going to make sure that we support students and teach them right from the off in year 7 how to use these different approaches, and just a few little notes around each of them. So your concept maps, if you think about those strategies that we just spoke about, we're getting them to link ideas. So we're getting them to think about how those things link and get that interleaving. We're also getting them to think about the why and the how, because we're asking them not only to throw a load of words onto a map, it's about the concepts. How are things joined together? How are these processes linked? So it's taking it to that next level. You can have highlighter all over these. So your highlighting and underlining comes in here as well. So it brings in lots of those different ideas in terms of what research shows is useful. Flashcards, these are a testing resource, so they're not about summarizing. So the trick, I think, with flashcards is not to have too much information on them. It's not meant to be that you are summarizing everything that you know about a topic. That comes on your condensed notes, the next one. This is about having those key prompts, those key questions, those subtitles, and on the back you've got some information, and it's about testing rather than getting too much information on those. And they're great flashcards, aren't they? Because you can get someone else testing you. I can test my son with his geography, and I'm not great at geography, but actually he's got the flashcards. It's just really easy for me to test him on that. Mnemonics we've already spoken about can increase recall by up to 77%. They don't apply to everything, but any scientists in the room will have heard of Mrs. Gren. We bang on about Mrs. Gren right the way through, sometimes key stage 2, definitely key stage 3, definitely key stage 4, about the processes of life. Oil rig, we use that regularly in chemistry at key stage 4. So we've got oxidation is loss of electrons, reduction is gain of electrons. And then a maths example, we've got in there the order of the processes that we would use in maths. So there's loads of those, and I think if there is an opportunity to use them, then take it for your students because it does help them to remember things in a certain order. And then your condensed notes is exactly that. You're summarizing, summarizing, summarizing from larger pieces of information. The trick with that is that you are using written notes. What this does as well as you just putting it in writing, which we know helps it to sink in. So you've read it, you've also written it. You might have colours on it to help it sink in. But you're also with that, you're having to select what's the most important thing. What is the important information? And, students find that really difficult. Up A level, students still find that difficult. Well, what is the important thing? So that is really something that we can't just send them off and do that. We've got to model that for them. We've got to model it over and over that I'm looking at this text. These are the bits that I think are really key. These are the bullet points that I might make from this and get them to practice that because it is a skill in its own right to be able to do that. Um, so yeah, so if you use any of those strategies really, aside from mnemonics, that just sort of picks out one, but the others just use a whole variety of those different approaches that we've looked at in that research. So, okay, you've decided which approaches you're going to push with your students. So you've decided that we really want to go with the concept maps or the flashcards, whatever it is. You then need to find ways to be able to teach them to do that. So I've mentioned already about consistency. I've mentioned about variety, which they sound a bit like fighting against each other, but it's not. It's about giving them a variety of different approaches so that they can find what works for them. And they might find one thing works better for one topic and something else works better for another. So it's about just exposing them to all of those. But then consistency in how we're using them and how we're teaching them how to use those across whole school and across the different key stages. So, for example, um, you've got your concept maps, you've got resources that all of your staff, whether it's in your team, whether it's whole school, but you've got those approaches that everybody is clear, this is what we mean in our setting of each of these. So you've got your concept map where you're teaching students to think of the subject, think of the idea, think of the sub-idea or the subtopic, branching those off and then really starting to make those connections across, which is the really challenging bit at the end. What you really want them to do with concept maps is they shouldn't be testing themselves from the off when they're producing the concept map. So some of them will go like, I'll just do it, I'll just go from closing everything and just trying to create my whole concept map. They're absolutely fine to do this in little pieces at a time. So look at some information, add to part of your concept map, look at some more information, add a little bit more, and then you can later on test yourself by making a concept map from that again. So just taking away that scaffolding quite slowly, not that you're testing yourself on it. What you want from your concept map is that it's an accurate record. So if you go straight from the off, testing yourself and how much you can remember, if you don't go back and check it and add to it, then you're not going to have an accurate record and you're building on sand then if your resource that you're using isn't accurate from the start. So you can definitely break it down so it's not as overwhelming, but some students really love concept maps. Condensed notes, I've already mentioned this, you really do need to support students in being able to produce those condensed notes. So I think the trick with those is it's about you modeling what they're taking from that. So I've used it here from a revision guide, just taking information from a revision guide. So showing them revision guides are really good because they've got those the key terminology in a different color or underlined. So about them looking for those cues when they're looking at any information, modeling that for them. And I would definitely be encouraging them to use bullet points. So let's break it down. If it's still too long, let's break it down again. But think about lists and bullet points. We know that we remember things much better if they're in, say, a numbered list, because in our head, we're like, I know there's 4, and that helps me then to have that scaffold of how many ideas do I need to be able to produce. So it's about them being brief. It's about them getting those bullet pointed notes. It's then about them going back, reading over it again, comparing what they've written, have they missed anything along the way, and using that idea of that look, cover, write, or say and check as they go through that. And then flashcards, you can buy flashcards, you can make flashcards. I with year nines last week, they're coming to end of Key Stage 3 revision, and I just got from Amazon some of those coloured cards like are on there. They absolutely love those. So they just got really engaged in that. So they were making their own. And as I said before, I think the trick is not to overload them. So you don't want too much information on them. I think that image on there on the right hand side, I think that they're too busy. I think it should be you've got a prompt or a question on one side and you've got some information on the other side. And they are for testing. So get someone else to test you. And then moving on from flashcards, it's about what is it that we're asking students to revise. And I think this is massive. So teaching them how to decide which bits they need to focus on and which bits they need to revisit and revise is really helpful for lots of reasons. If we're teaching them to really hone in on the bits that they're not very good at, we're breaking it down for them so the whole thing isn't overwhelming. So I'm not asking you to spend loads of time on everything. Let's identify the bits that we need to so that they're not as overwhelmed and they're just not wasting time because everybody wants to succeed. So it's really natural to focus on the topics that actually you're really good at because you want to get that sort of gratification that you're able to do something. So it is a bit of a challenge to get them to really go for the things that they're not very good at. So what I've got there is I try and encourage mine to revise the purple pen or the green pen or the red pen, whatever it is that they make their corrections in, get them to revise that stuff. If they're looking through the book, it's like the stuff that you've got right, you don't need to spend loads of time on that. You're looking for where you've had that purple pen or that green pen. You're looking for the bits that you didn't quite get right in the first place. That's the bit that you want to focus on. So trying to get them to really do that and embrace, okay, it's the stuff I don't need to revise everything. I know that is a really good skill. But like I say, it's natural to hone in on the stuff that actually you're good at because you want to feel good about that. So you need to encourage them to move away from that. So the other thing that you can do, oh, sorry, that's not there. The other thing that you can do is it can be an extension of your flashcards, getting them to focus on the hardest topics or the content. We get them to use this lightness system. So that is where they will just think about, they'll try and answer the questions. The ones that they can answer really easily, put that away. I'm not going to do that until next week. The ones that they can't do, they're the ones that they keep struggling with. They're going to go in a box or a little wallet that says, right, I need to test this. I need to check this again tomorrow, or however often they're going to do it. So they end up with 2 or 3 boxes. They're the ones I got off straight away. I'm not going to worry about that till next week. This one, I'm always getting that wrong. That's going in my wallet. I'm going to test it again tomorrow. And then you've got something in between. So you're moving these cards around. And as you get secure with them, they'll get stuck in that one at the end that I don't need to come back to until next week. So anything that you can do around that, just to get them away from um, revising everything and feeling overwhelmed with that and not wasting the time and just really honing in on the stuff that they know they find difficult. Um, and that idea of that space learning, of coming back to the things and focusing on the things that I really need to revise is much wider than just flashcards. You can do it with anything, can't you? You can do it with quizzing, you can do it with any of the strategies. It's like coming back, looking at your concept maps. It's the concept map and the ones that I really struggle to do, or the ones that, I just find that topic more difficult. That's the one that I'm going to focus on more. So they will need guidance to be able to do that. Another approach that I really like, so this has been shared with me by McGull High School. This is a system that they use. They use the ACT approach to revision. And again, the trick is it's whole school. It's quite new, but they've taken it back to Key Stage 3. Students in there were showing me the stuff they've done around this. This is the revision, and this is what they're just getting the same diet across subjects in terms of the approaches and how to apply it in that subject. The reason they introduced this system was because this activate bit was what their students weren't doing. And this goes back to revising the purple pen. So getting them to really focus at the beginning. Okay, let's do some self-assessment. I'm not asking you to revise everything in loads of detail. Let's activate. Let's see what you know. So you can provide them with a quiz. They can use Educate. They can use that platform to do that little test and go, okay, right, that helps me to know the bits that I do really need to focus on. So that was the reason, that was the bit that was missing for them, and that's why they've really brought that in. Then they'll get them to consolidate it. So they might use a revision guide, they might use some of the lesson resources, they might use the information on the platform like Educate. Whatever it is, they're just doing that revision and fill in those gaps. They might be making concept maps or flashcards. And then that last bit goes back to this practice testing. So they're now practicing questions. So it might be that you give them a past exam question. It might be that they go back on and quiz themselves again and just see how far they've come. I'm going to just pause for breath for a second because, Nick, I'd asked you whether you would just demo some of the things that you can do on Educate because I don't know it as well as you, but I do know that loads of that stuff I've been talking about just now, you can do that manually, but you can also do it on Educate. So if I stop sharing, would you like to just give us a
Demo.
little demo?
Absolutely. So I will just share my screen. Hang on a second. Tracy, can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, got Revision Wizard on there.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'll just give you a quick whistle-stop tour of what Educate looks like for your students, because as Tracy said, retrieval practice quizzing comes up as one of the most impactful strategies that students can use to revise. And with Educate, we will be able to identify those weakest topics for your children. So starting front and center in orange, these are quizzes that have been set by teachers. So again, you can be looking at the students' data, you can be identifying what children need to cover, and you can see you can leave a message for your students. Even if they come back and they've started the quiz, it will still be there, so they can identify what they want to use for revision. Revision Wizard is an algorithm that works on space learning and retrieval practice. So it combines everything that students have revised. So teacher set quizzing as well as student-led revision. And if I come to choose revise, these are the subjects that we offer on Educate. So I can pick maths, for example, and you can see I've been offered factors. And we always start low stakes. So we don't want to overwhelm students. So you can see in this particular quiz, students are just being offered 5 questions. So we're keeping it really low stakes. Students can also use quizzes that they have already completed. So a good example, I'll show you some science now. We've got a really nice quiz that has been completed based on Foundation Paper 2 for physics. And this is where a teacher used one of our revision templates, and you can see those were all the topics in the quiz. The student has had a go, has completed the quiz, but now straight away we can come along and we can look at, where are those weakest topics for the particular student. With Educate, we do have some revision content embedded, so if I come along and click revise, for example, I can start looking at the study guides. I can show all lines, and you can see we've tried to make them really clear and engaging with as much information and illustrations or diagrams as possible. And then finally, we have the study and quiz yourself section here. So really proud that we released A level at the start of the year, but you can see I've got the breakdown of content already. So as a student, I can see how many quiz questions I've answered. Because we RAG rate it, it's really clear for the children to take an overview of where they need to improve. So maybe work, energy, and power. You can see I'm only achieving 39%. So I can really get a good overview, and maybe kinetic potential energies is where I want to go. But I can also use Educate to show my weakest topics. So by clicking on this, I can now see my personal weakest topics for A-level physics, for example, and straight away I'm quizzing myself straight away. So I get a really good overview. With Educate, we will always give feedback in the moment that the kids answer the question. So that will that will help with any gaps in knowledge or misconceptions, and will provide modelling and context where we can. So I will stop sharing and go back to Tracy. I also wanted to say, and forgive me, I didn't say this at the beginning of the section, we will be having a Q&A at the end of today's webinar. So I have already had one question which I've answered, which is that the recording will be shared with the slides at the end, as well as an overview of some upcoming summer revision webinars that we'll be offering, which do also include webinars with AQA with the challenges around exam board insights. We've got OCR for A level, as well as strategies for international schools. We've also got an overview on decolonizing the curriculum, as well as meaningful data and transition. So we have got a busy summer lineup in place as well. So I will now pass across to Tracy. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Can you see my screen again now?
I
Yeah.
absolutely can,
Oh,
yes.
Nick, I was just waiting for you to start answering those A-level physics questions there. I was like,
Think
go on, give it a
I'll
go.
leave that to you, I think. Thank you anyway.
Oh, I came out of my A-level physics exam and just thought, right, I'm at my peak. I'm never going to be able to do that again. Found that much more difficult than the other two. That's brilliant. Thank you, Nick. And basically, what you've just described with the algorithm, it's that lightning system, but without needing to find these folders and boxes. And so, yeah, all done for you with the algorithm, which is great. And I know I've said this, I've told you this before, that my son, because he can do this on his phone, just doesn't see it. This is proper secret revision. So when I talked at the beginning about sort of what we see as traditional revision, sort of out of school, and then we've got some secret revision that we might sneak into the curriculum, I also think it's secret revision if my son can do it on his phone. So I've told you before that if I say to him, have you got any homework? He says, no, I haven't got any. I've only got Educate. And I'm like, okay. So yeah, he just doesn't see it as work. It's great. Right, okay, thank you for that. So, and that really, that ACT approach is what you've just described there because of the extra stuff you've got now in terms of those videos. And I know you've got stuff around the required practicals as well, haven't you, where students can sort of teach themselves. So that consolidate stuff is built in as well. Great, thank you. Just thinking about the revision resources that you might use or might want to use, the quizzing platforms, as Nick's just described, they really can target those purple pen areas. So, picking out what are your weakest topics, they can really help with that and just take that, just how overwhelming it can be to revise, and I know my son does come home from school. Sometimes I've got an assessment. What is it on? Just my teacher just said everything that we've done, and I'm like, it's not helpful. So if that's if it's overwhelming, then they're less likely to engage at all. So whatever we can do to target those purple pen areas. You might want to use pre-produced revision resources such as flashcards so you can buy them. These are some that we've used in Star that we've just made if people want those. So they stick those or print it double-sided or stick these things together and they've got questions and a bit too much text for me on those, but you know what I mean. You can see what I mean. Placemats, you could use placemats that you give out for students that are pre-populated. This one is a pre-populated one, or you can just give them the headings and get students to practice doing those. Or what I've done with some of mine is I give them the pre-populated ones, they look through those, and then I give them the blank version with just the headings, and they start to do that. That's basically that look, cover, write, and check. So you can use those in different ways. Revision guides, my one thing that I really would urge you if you give students revision guides, if they all have a revision guide, use them as much as you can in lessons. So I had a little light bulb moment. I went into a school last year and I saw the teachers there doing some amazing stuff with the visualizers. I'm all over that, but they were absolutely annotating the revision guide and I was thinking, why do I not do that? That is, we were giving them all a revision guide, but then actually expecting them just to know how to engage with it. And I know if I'm coming to read something that's really long, if I've done any kind of annotating or, highlighting on it, it just doesn't feel like as big a task because I feel like, oh, I'll already remember some of this. I've already engaged with it. So this is an example of something that I've used where I've been on the visualizer with my class and I'm annotating, we're asking questions, I'm modeling some of that thing as we go through that. So if you do use revision guides, use them all the way through your teaching so that students know how to use those and they're more familiar with them. Otherwise, they'll just get used to proper table leg up or something. Um, for slow starters, so those that might be a bit late to revision or those that are really resistant to independent learning, I would really focus on, got some, these would be my sort of key tips. Focus on assessment objective one for any independent learning to try and get them into that. So set them some quizzes where they really are testing that assessment objective one, for example. If they're going to do anything independently, it'll be AO1. Those other skills of applying and analysing and evaluating, they're going to need your guidance much more. But whatever students can be doing in the background to really build that knowledge and understanding, you can then teach them some of those other skills when you're working with them. Exam technique is absolutely crucial. So, for lots of my year 11s now, I really am it's about exam technique and it's about building their confidence now. It's really about just, grabbing marks wherever they can, and some of that will be through exam technique. It definitely makes a difference. Modeling, 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 modeling. What's in my head as you're looking at that, that links to content, but it also links to exam technique. So look, I'm looking at the number of marks, I'm looking at the command word, I'm looking at what does this remind me of. So any of that modeling that you can do. Embedding retrieval into all lessons and homework. So I think we do that in lessons, but it could be that you move on to a next topic and actually all their independent work. So you're setting them quizzes, for example, on Educate from the previous topic just to keep that in the head. I really would focus on maths questions, even if their knowledge and understanding of science is fairly weak. So if they've got any, math skills, if they're better at maths, or just having a go at the maths questions, because they don't necessarily need to know the science to be able to do that. So they can use some of those other skills. And just being really honest with them and saying, there's going to be some things that you see in this exam that you haven't seen before. Likelihood here, you're probably not meant to have seen it before, but just have a go, particularly if there's anything using data that they can have a go. There are some standalone marks that come with that. And then just to sum up really with the key takeaways before we move to any questions, specifically teach revision strategies. You need to specifically teach them. Um, Introduce them from Key Stage 3 if you can, or whenever you can, whenever you've got your students, just introduce it as early as possible. Don't leave it all till Key Stage 4. Wherever possible, use consistent systems. That could be whole school, or it could be just across your team, across your department. Give them a variety of things to play around with and to try. Just said for those resistant to independent study, try and get them into it through AO1. And like Nick said before, start really simple. Just try and get their confidence. I do really believe that, particularly for year 11s at this time, who, some of them are starting to have a bit of a meltdown. Just it's the confidence. It's the confidence to go in and have a go and not to freeze. Plan time in your lessons to develop the resources or to practice using pre-prepared resources. So show them how to do that. Um, Past questions, practice, practice, practice. The questions get asked in similar ways. We run out of ways of asking them. So they just get more familiar with those. And just really encouraging them that it isn't too late. I had a year 11 say to me today, he was doing an assessment, and he said, "Oh, it's no point for me now." And I'm like, there is. I know you haven't done any revision yet, but it's never too late. We can all make some improvements in there. I don't know. Before we just go on to the keep in touch with us, Nick, I just wonder whether we've got any questions.
We do have some questions actually, and also I had a question if that's okay,
Okay.
just based on what you were saying. I mean, thinking about GCSE pupils that have had, poor attendance or are just struggling, what would you say is the best approach, especially if they've got poor attendance?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to those ones that are late starters. It's about, I think now for in year 11, it really is about trying to get their confidence to have a go. So in the school I was working in this morning, we've got a girl who her attendance is, through no fault of her own, her attendance has been really, really poor, and she's almost at that point of going, oh, what's the point? So I would say I would really be focusing on doing less but doing it well. So with her, I've got a program that I'm going to be focusing on the core practicals. So that is something that, she remembers some of those and we can get her to have a go. What I just said around anything with data or maths, she's quite good at maths. So anything around data and maths, you don't need to know the science necessarily. You can have a go at putting numbers into an equation. You can have a go at showing it in so many significant figures and things like that. So it really is about going through past questions, but going, okay, well, you're going to get a question that you're not going to be able to have a go at, but you can have a go at another one. Just try, and I just talk about it's like supermarket sweep, isn't it? It's about them running around, grabbing as many marks as they can wherever they can. But yeah, focus on doing less, but doing it well. Exam technique, maths and data, building their confidence through this quizzing and this past questioning. So I think that would be my strategy.
That's wonderful. So I have got some other questions. I know you mentioned it, Tracy, and forgive me, I didn't write it down, but could you reshare the name of the school that used the ACT approach,
Yes, it,
please?
it was McGull High in Sefton in the Northwest. Yeah, the head of science shared that. Laura
Wonderful,
Perry.
wonderful. And do you have any different strategies for A level at all?
Um, I think I no, because I use the same strategies, so I just use the same strategies. Um, Same strategies apply, so it's the same research. And actually, even when they get to A level, they still need support, particularly like condensed notes. That's something that they really struggle with. Although, if we can get them through key stage 3 and 4, practicing some of those, I think I would just, I'll I do you. It's the same strategies that I use. A level biology, I use the same strategies. Concept maps, condensed notes are massive, and still getting them to do that look, cover, write, and check. I think that works the same.
I was going to say, I mentioned that we launched A level at Christmas,
Hmm.
and my son's in year 13. He's going to be sitting A level physics. Actually, the data that I shared is his A level data. I'm sure he doesn't mind
No.
his mum using it. But what was a little bit of a eureka moment, I feel, was he had Educate sneakily for A level over Christmas, and he came to me and he said, "Actually, Mum, all it's shown me is I don't know much about this topic." And I was like, "That's the
That's
hallelujah
it.
moment. This
And
is the
yeah,
whole
that's
point of
that's the
quizzing."
purple pen, isn't it? That's the
Yeah,
purple pen stuff to
yeah,
revise. It's that
abs
bit. And it's the other
absolutely.
bits that you find easy, although it's tempting to keep doing those because you're getting good marks. Really focus on those purple pen ones and see your marks go up. I wanted to ask you something actually about Educate.
Mm.
Um, just thinking about send, obviously, send, we've got more and more send pupils. I'm thinking about when I'm doing things manually, I'm choosing the font. Doing assessments today, I can't tell you how many different colour paper we had for different students. So we're thinking about the background, we're thinking about the font. I'm sure as Educate, you must have thought about accessibility, but what does it look like?
Yeah, I absolutely can. Do you mind if I take over and share my screen then,
No, of
please, if
course
that's
not.
okay?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
And I will show you. Actually, that's a fab question. And thank you so much because really, I should have mentioned that when I did my little demo. Can you see my screen okay there, Tracy?
Yes, got it. Yep.
Fabulous. So, for any school that's using Educake, your students can now personalize their learning. So, I'm coming along to the My Account section at the top. It automatically will focus on Educate default, the Educate color, and normal spacing. But actually, what the children can do now is they can personalize their fonts like so. We're still working on this, like you can see. So we haven't actually changed the font size because you can just come up here and you can
Hmm.
make things bigger
Yeah.
just by clicking on that. So that hasn't been our priority. But kids can now expand their color, and then this is really popular.
Oh, yeah,
So
that's
students
great.
can come along and they can change everything so it makes feels really personalized to their level of learning. But what's really interesting, so we added our accessibility in October, so only just a few months ago. In the first 60 days, 120,000 kids personalize their learning, and the most popular was Verdana
Hmm.
and then this lovely
Oh,
blue
yeah.
color.
Yeah.
So I think actually just personalizing your learning to what works best for you. And you could answer a question like so, you can come back, and then if you decided actually that doesn't suit me, you can just come straight away
Mm.
and you can just change it to something so that the next question is still personalized for your learning. So
Oh,
thank you. That's a really
that's
good
great,
point.
because that is again, it's that when you're talking about consistency, what they're getting in the classroom in terms of those adaptations that we're doing for those, it's that consistency that's going on into their independent learning as well, which just really helps. The more that we can smooth that, then we can get what we're doing in the curriculum into their independent stuff and get them
Absolutely.
doing that. Brilliant.
Absolutely. Have you got time, do you think, for one more question,
Yeah, go
Tracy?
on, just while I share my screen
Okay,
again. Go on.
no problem. So, a great question from Elizabeth. Thank you so much. Elizabeth is a lecturer in FE. Their biggest issue is that many of their learners are resitting math and English and simply do
Mhm.
not want to engage. They are
Yeah,
so demotivated, which breaks my
yeah, I
heart.
know, I know.
Any additional tips for motivation and focus that you can share with lovely Elizabeth?
I think I absolutely feel your pain. I think this is so tricky. It's such a tricky situation to be in. I think for me, it's about that easy way in. So it's that maybe not jumping straight in with those more challenging ways of revising, but going in with some of those things that are seem easier. So, like you're highlighting, lots of talk. I would get them doing a lot of stuff verbally rather than focusing straight away on the writing. But I would say as well, like Nick said before, doing that, the low stakes. Anything that you can do to build their confidence, so just to get them to get some quick wins. So I think it's going to have to be simple quizzes, absolutely stripping it back so that they're just focusing on, that sort of medium demand stuff, not going any higher than that because we just want them to pass so that you can start to build the confidence. So I think regular, like we're in science, we've got entry level for science, which we know that is really engaging for students that are, really working towards sort of grades 1 to 3. The reason that that works so well for those students is that they do lots of these little activities, these little multiple choice quizzes, and they're just achieving. So they're doing those every couple of weeks, and they're just achieving. So I really do think it's confidence. Those students have come to sixth form now thinking that they're rubbish at English and maths, haven't they? And that's really hard, and it's about them having a go. And the only way we'll get them to have a go is if we build the confidence. So I would say take let them guide the strategies that they use, but don't jump in with those harder stuff. I would focus on simple quizzes, practice and simple quizzes. Is that okay?
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Well, it is now nearly 10 to
Oh,
5.
sorry,
So
everybody.
no, it's been really fascinating. So thank you so much, Tracy, for being an absolute superstar. And if there's any questions we haven't managed to answer, I'm so sorry. But we will put that we will send across a message. We will send Tracy's fabulous slides. We'll send this recording. And if there's any schools out there that need some help with Educate, we can give it away for free for a little bit for you to help, especially in this challenging stretch of revision that we've got ahead of us. But
Oh, that's great. That's lovely. Really
but
good.
but thank you so much for joining us today.
And then please, when you get the slides, do go on the QR and follow us on LinkedIn. Link up with us. Thank you, Nick.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a
Thank you.
lovely Monday evening. Take care. Bye.